She started her day like she always did, arriving at the restaurant before the morning rush. The air was still cool, and the city had not yet fully woken. She liked this quiet part of her routine, the few minutes when she could gather her thoughts before the clatter and chatter of the busy restaurant filled the space. As she walked through the back doors, the smell of fresh bread and coffee greeted her, comforting in a way that only familiar smells could. She had been a waitress for years, a job that didn't bring fame or wealth but gave her something steady. It allowed her to live in the small apartment she loved, one with creaking floors and a little balcony where she could watch the city lights at night. She liked the view most of all during the winter, when the streets below were quiet and the glow of streetlights reflected on the snow. In those moments, she would imagine a different life, one where she could perform music every night in front of a real audience, where people came to listen to her, not just to eat and leave. Her coworkers already knew she played the piano. She didn't hide it, though she rarely talked about it at work. It wasn't a secret, but it was hers. On her days off, she would spend hours at a small piano in her apartment, practicing pieces she loved, learning new ones from old music sheets she had collected over the years. Sometimes she would play while cooking, sometimes while cleaning, letting the melodies float through her small apartment. Music was her escape, her joy, and, in a way, her silent rebellion against a life that often felt too ordinary. The restaurant was starting to fill. Business people and tourists came in, looking for a meal and a place to rest. She moved quickly, gracefully, carrying plates, taking orders, and listening to stories that strangers shared as if she were invisible, someone who existed in the background of their lives. She had learned early on to smile and nod, to be patient even when customers were rude or impatient. She learned to carry the weight of the day with a quiet strength, never letting it crush her spirit. The millionaire had been coming to the restaurant for months. Everyone knew who he was. He wore suits that cost more than the apartment she lived in and drove cars that gleamed like mirrors. He wasn't just rich. He had a presence that filled the room, and people noticed him immediately. Most of the staff stayed cautious around him, polite but distant. He was charming in a way that could feel dangerous, the kind of charm that hid sharp edges beneath it. She noticed him too, of course, but she treated him like any other customer. He gave her a generous tip once, and the staff whispered about it for days, speculating on whether he had an interest in her or was just showing off. She didn't care much for speculation. She cared for the music in her apartment and the small joys she could create for herself. Life could be simple and kind if you let it. That morning, she had no idea that her life was about to shift in a way that would bring both tension and opportunity. The millionaire walked in, as he often did, but this time he had an unusual look on his face. He was smiling, but there was a spark in his eyes that made her uneasy. He asked to see her after her shift. She agreed politely, thinking it might be about a generous tip or some trivial conversation. She had no idea that he had something far more complicated in mind. Her shift went on. She carried plates of food, refilled glasses, and listened to conversations, all while keeping a sense of calm that was both natural and deliberate. Music played softly from the restaurant speakers, but her mind wandered to the piano in her apartment. She thought of the pieces she wanted to learn next, the melodies that made her heart ache with beauty. In her imagination, she could see herself performing, not for strangers in a restaurant but for an audience that really listened, an audience that could feel the music as deeply as she did. After the shift, she approached the millionaire as he had requested. He was standing near the bar, a glass of champagne in his hand. His smile was welcoming, but it carried a subtle edge, the kind of smile that could charm or hurt depending on the moment. "You play piano, don't you?" he asked casually, as if he had just noticed. "Yes," she replied, careful to keep her tone neutral. "I play when I can." He nodded, taking a slow sip of his drink. "I've heard you play before. You have a gift. Not many people notice it, but I have." She felt a flicker of pride mixed with caution. Compliments were fine, but she knew that flattery often had strings attached. "Thank you," she said softly. He leaned slightly closer. "I'm hosting a party next week. I think it would be wonderful if you played the piano there. It would be quite the highlight." Her heart skipped a beat. A party with the city's elite? This could be the opportunity she had dreamed of. For a moment, she let herself imagine performing in a grand room. People stopping to listen, some even applauding her. "That sounds wonderful," she said, trying to hide her excitement. He smiled wider, but there was still something in his eyes that made her pause. "I'll make all the arrangements. Just be ready to play." She nodded, trying to appear calm, though her mind was racing with both anticipation and doubt. She left the restaurant that evening feeling a mixture of excitement and unease. The streets were busy, the lights bright, and the sounds of the city a constant hum around her. She thought of the piano at home, imagining herself playing in a room full of people who would actually pay attention. It was thrilling, almost too thrilling to believe. The next few days passed in a blur. She went to work, practiced on her piano, and tried to prepare herself for what was coming. Her coworkers noticed a change in her mood. She seemed lighter, almost glowing, and they teased her gently about being distracted. She didn't explain much, only smiling and saying she had something special to look forward to. Meanwhile, the millionaire was quietly setting the stage for the event. What she did not know was that he had no intention of simply showcasing her talent. He had decided, for reasons that were his alone, that the piano performance would be part of the evening's entertainment in a way that humiliated her. It wasn't cruel for cruelty's sake. It was his way of controlling a situation, of proving that wealth could manipulate lives. The thought of performing under such scrutiny had not even crossed her mind. In her world, music was honest and pure. She couldn't imagine someone using it as a tool for ridicule. She practiced diligently, unaware of the trap being set, her fingers moving over the keys with love and dedication. When she played, she lost herself in the music. Each note was an expression of her hopes, her fears, and her quiet joy. The melodies told stories she could not speak aloud, stories of small victories, of ordinary struggles, of dreams too fragile to share with most people. She played late into the night, often stopping only when exhaustion took her, her apartment filled with the soft echo of her passion. Evenings like these made her feel alive in a way that waiting tables could not. The applause she imagined from her imaginary audience was more meaningful than the tips she earned or the polite compliments from customers. Music was her voice, her sanctuary, her declaration that she existed in a world that often ignored people like her. By the time the party approached, she felt ready, though a quiet nervousness lingered. She didn't know what the millionaire had planned, only that she had been asked to perform. The simplicity of that instruction was comforting, even if it was laced with an undercurrent she couldn't see. Her life had always been about balancing realities: work, survival, dreams. She had learned to find joy in small victories, to celebrate accomplishments that might seem insignificant to others. Learning a challenging piece of music, saving enough money for a piano repair, finishing a week without a major mistake at work. These were victories she understood and cherished. And yet, something about this invitation felt bigger, weightier, almost surreal. It was a bridge between the life she knew and the life she dreamed of. She didn't realize at that moment that the bridge might be shaky, built not only with opportunity but also with hidden challenges. Her coworkers continued to notice the change in her demeanor. One asked if she was nervous. She shook her head. "A little," she admitted, "but mostly excited. It's a chance." The millionaire, meanwhile, continued his preparations quietly. Invitations had been sent, arrangements made, guests chosen with care. He had already decided how the evening would unfold, who would notice what, who would laugh and who would whisper. The plan was meticulous, just as he liked things to be. But he had underestimated one thing: her heart. Her love for music was genuine, unwavering, and strong. Even in the most difficult circumstances, her passion had a way of shining through, and that would soon become evident. As the days passed, she practiced with a focus she had never had before. Each session on the piano brought her closer to confidence, her fingers learning to dance across the keys, her mind absorbing the melodies until they became part of her. The music wasn't just notes. It was her essence, her story, and soon, the world would hear it, though not in the way she expected. She went to bed each night thinking about the performance, dreaming of the moment she would sit at the piano, let her fingers move, and speak through music. Little did she know that the audience would be watching for something other than her talent, and that she would have to face not just the pressure of performing but also the hidden motives of someone who thought he could control her story. Yet, despite this, she remained hopeful. Hope was a quiet companion, patient and persistent, and it gave her courage she didn't even realize she had. She believed that music, in its honesty and beauty, could hold its own against anything, even arrogance and cruelty. And so, she prepared, unaware that the night ahead would test more than her skill. It would test her spirit, her courage, and the strength of the dreams she had nurtured quietly, patiently, for so many years. The week went by slowly, each day blending into the next. She worked her shifts at the restaurant, smiled at customers, and poured coffee with the same gentle care she always did. But her mind was constantly on the party. She imagined the grand room, the lights, the faces of people who might really listen to her music, the way a single melody could hold everyone still for a moment. She felt a flutter of nervous excitement every time she thought about it. It was unlike anything she had ever felt before. A mixture of anticipation, fear, and hope all tangled together. Her coworkers noticed it immediately. They watched her walk a little taller, speak a little more confidently, and hum quietly while she cleaned tables or carried plates. They smiled at her, teasing her lightly. "You've got that glow," one said, nudging her gently. "You've got something coming, don't you?" She smiled but didn't answer. She didn't want to say too much. Some part of her didn't want to jinx it, and some part wasn't sure how to explain it even if she tried. All she could think about was the piano. She could almost feel the keys under her fingers, the way the sound would ripple through the room and into the hearts of people listening. She held on to that feeling as tightly as she could. Then, one afternoon, the millionaire himself walked into the restaurant. He seemed almost casual, but there was a sharpness in the way he moved, a confidence that filled the space around him. He asked to see her in the back room, the same way he had the week before. She nodded, trying to keep her expression neutral, but her heart beat faster than usual. "You've been practicing," he said when she arrived. He didn't ask it as a question, more as a statement. "I can tell." She nodded. "Yes, I want to be ready." He studied her for a moment. "Good. It's important to be ready." His tone was casual, but there was a weight behind it that made her hesitate. She wasn't sure if he meant ready to play beautifully or ready for something else entirely. "The party will be elegant," he continued. "Very important people will be there. Everyone will watch. Everyone will notice. It will be a moment you won't forget." Her stomach twisted. Part of her wanted to ask for details, to know what he meant, but she didn't. She nodded again, hoping she sounded calm. "I'll be ready." The millionaire smiled, a smile that seemed both friendly and dangerous. "Good. I'll see you there." He left before she could respond, leaving her with a mixture of excitement and unease that she could not shake. After that, she spent her evenings practicing more than ever. She learned pieces she had only dreamed of playing, working on the difficult passages until her fingers ached. She wanted every note to be perfect, every melody to flow naturally, so that when the time came, she could forget the world and simply play. She imagined the moment when the audience would pause, when they would really hear her, and she held on to that image like a lifeline. But not everything around her was as encouraging as her own hope. Some of her co-workers were nervous for her. They had seen the millionaire in action, had witnessed the way he used his wealth to control situations and people. They warned her gently, trying to prepare her for the possibility that not everything was as it seemed. "You have to be careful," one of them said. "He's not always honest in his intentions. Sometimes he likes to see people squirm, even when it's not necessary." She nodded politely, but she didn't let it sink in too deeply. It was hard to imagine someone using music to hurt her. Music had always been honest, pure, and comforting. It seemed impossible that it could become a tool for humiliation. Yet, the seed of doubt had been planted. As the day of the party approached, the restaurant grew busier than usual. She worked long hours, feeling the exhaustion in her bones but refusing to let it dull her excitement. Each time she set a plate on a table, poured a drink, or wiped a counter, she thought about the piano waiting for her, the performance she had practiced for so long. She imagined the lights, the audience, the sound of the music filling the room. She also imagined the reactions. She wanted people to be impressed, to feel something in the music, to understand the stories she told through her fingers. She didn't want applause for the wrong reasons. She wanted respect for the talent and effort she had poured into every note. Her apartment became a sanctuary in those final days before the party. She spent hours there, practicing in silence, letting the music absorb her worries and fears. The small room seemed larger when she played, and the world outside faded into quiet background noise. She played slowly at first, feeling the notes carefully, then faster, letting the rhythms carry her. She smiled when a piece came together perfectly, her heart swelling with quiet pride. The night before the party, she could hardly sleep. Her mind raced with anticipation, imagining the room, the people, the piano. She thought about her performance endlessly, rehearsing it in her head, imagining every detail down to the way she would move her fingers across the keys. Even when she closed her eyes, the melodies continued to play, soft and persistent, carrying her into the early hours of the morning. The next day, she went to work, her energy low but her focus sharp. She moved through the restaurant almost automatically, taking orders, serving food, and keeping a steady smile on her face. She was polite and professional, but inside, she was buzzing with a mixture of nerves and excitement. During her shift, the millionaire came in once again. He didn't approach her directly this time, but his presence was noticeable, the way he surveyed the room, the guests, and the staff. She noticed the way some of the other employees glanced at him, whispering quietly among themselves. There was a sense of anticipation in the air, a tension that seemed almost tangible. When her shift ended, she went home, trying to rest before the evening. She practiced once more, playing slowly, deliberately, as if each note could hold the key to her confidence. She wanted to be prepared for every possibility, to play not just for herself but for everyone who might judge her. She knew that the night could be challenging, but she refused to let fear control her. Her mind wandered to the party itself. She imagined walking into the grand room, the lights shimmering, the guests dressed in their finest clothes. She imagined the piano, polished and gleaming, waiting for her hands to bring it to life. She imagined the sound of the music, strong and confident, filling every corner of the space. And yet, even as she imagined all of this, a small part of her worried. What if it wasn't what she expected? What if the audience wasn't kind? What if the millionaire's intentions were not what he had promised? She tried to push these thoughts aside, focusing instead on the music, on the feeling of her fingers moving across the keys, and the way the melodies lifted her spirits. She also thought about the people who had supported her. Her coworkers, though worried, had offered advice and encouragement. Her neighbors, who sometimes stopped by to listen as she played, had given her kind words and smiles. She realized that even if the night did not go as planned, she had a network of people who believed in her and her talent. The day of the party finally arrived. She spent the morning in careful preparation, choosing an outfit that was simple but elegant, one that allowed her to move freely at the piano. She practiced once more in her apartment, running through the pieces she had prepared, letting each note resonate until it felt natural and effortless. As she left for the venue, the city seemed unusually bright, almost celebratory. The streets were bustling, but her mind was focused entirely on what lay ahead. She reminded herself to breathe, to stay calm, and to trust the hours of practice she had put in. She reminded herself that music was her strength, her voice, and her refuge. When she arrived at the location, she was met with grandeur she had only seen in magazines or movies. The lights, the decorations, the guests. Everything was far beyond anything she had imagined. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves, and reminded herself that this was an opportunity, a chance to share her music with people who might truly appreciate it. She was led to the room where the piano stood, polished and gleaming under the lights. She could hear the faint chatter of guests in the other rooms, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. Her heart raced, but she felt a sense of calm settle over her. She reminded herself that she had prepared for this, that she had practiced tirelessly, and that the music itself would guide her. As she stood before the piano, the reality of the evening hit her. This was not just a practice session, not just another day at work. This was a moment that could change the way people saw her, a moment that would test her courage and her love for music. She took a deep breath, placed her fingers on the keys, and let the melodies flow through her, unaware of the full intentions of the people around her, unaware that the night held challenges she had never imagined. But she was ready in the only way that mattered. She was ready to play, to let the music speak, and to face whatever came next with grace and courage, trusting that her talent and her heart would guide her through the night. The night of the party arrived, and the city streets glittered with lights as she made her way to the venue. The building was enormous, grander than anything she had ever seen in person. Crystal chandeliers sparkled from high ceilings, and golden decorations reflected the glow of candles and spotlights. She felt a mixture of awe and nervousness. Every step she took toward the entrance made her heart beat faster, but she reminded herself to breathe, to stay calm, and to trust her preparation. As she entered the main hall, she was immediately struck by the crowd. Men and women in elegant dresses and sharp suits mingled, laughing and clinking glasses. The chatter and laughter filled the room, a constant hum that made her feel both excited and out of place. She adjusted the strap of her simple dress and tried to walk with confidence, letting herself blend into the scene without feeling small. A few of the guests glanced at her as she passed, whispering among themselves. She caught snippets of their words, some curious, some dismissive, but she tried not to let it disturb her. She had learned to carry herself with quiet strength, to remain focused on her own purpose even when the world around her seemed intimidating. Her purpose tonight was clear. Play the piano and let the music speak for her. The piano was placed at the center of the room, a grand instrument polished to a shine that reflected the lights above. She approached it slowly, feeling the coolness of the keys under her fingers before she even sat down. It was real. She was here. She was about to play in front of a room full of people who had no idea who she truly was. The millionaire stood nearby, observing her with a subtle, calculating smile. She noticed the way his eyes flicked from her to the guests, noting reactions, whispering quietly to a few people who had clearly been given instructions. Something in the back of her mind whispered caution, but she pushed it aside. She had prepared for this. She trusted her hands, her fingers, her heart. Music was honest. Music could not betray her. She sat at the piano, taking a deep breath. The chatter in the room began to quiet slightly as people noticed that something was about to happen. She adjusted her posture, letting her hands hover above the keys, feeling the smooth surface and imagining the sound that would soon fill the air. The first notes were delicate, almost hesitant, as if testing the waters. Her fingers trembled slightly, but she forced herself to focus, to trust the music. The notes started to flow more confidently, each one carrying her feelings, her hopes, and the quiet strength she had nurtured for years. The audience began to notice. Some stopped talking, turning their attention to the piano as the melody grew stronger. But then, she sensed it. Some guests were not here to simply listen. There were smirks, quiet whispers, and exchanged glances that made her feel as if she were being studied, judged, perhaps even mocked. Her pulse quickened. The millionaire's presence, calm and commanding, seemed to control the energy in the room, and she realized he had not merely invited her to play. He had orchestrated a situation where some guests expected to see her falter. For a moment, her confidence wavered. Her hands shook slightly as she stumbled over a tricky passage. She could hear a faint, barely audible laugh from one corner of the room. Heat rose to her cheeks, and a flicker of panic ran through her. She thought of running away, of giving up, but she clenched her jaw and forced herself to continue. Music was her truth. She would not let anyone take that from her. She closed her eyes briefly, inhaling deeply, and let her fingers find the rhythm again. Slowly, deliberately, she rebuilt the melody, letting each note carry more strength, more emotion. She imagined herself not in that room but in her apartment, where the music had always been hers alone. She remembered the hours of practice, the tiny victories, the moments of joy that had come from mastering a piece. She reminded herself that she had earned this moment, no matter what anyone else thought. The change was subtle at first. The whispers in the room quieted as people began to notice her skill, the beauty in the music. The notes grew fuller, richer, more confident. Her hands moved with a fluidity that made the piano sing, carrying emotions that could not be expressed in words. A few guests exchanged surprised glances, clearly impressed, and she felt a spark of hope. The millionaire's expression shifted slightly. The smug confidence that had marked his face now flickered with something else. Frustration. He had expected control, a sense of power over the evening, and yet she was reclaiming it with every note she played. The audience, or at least part of it, was captivated. They could not deny the talent in front of them, and their attention shifted fully to her performance. Her heart lifted. She felt a surge of energy as the room transformed from a space of intimidation into one of possibility. Music had the power to change the mood, to shift the focus, and she used it completely. She allowed herself to feel the rhythm, the harmony, the joy of playing for a real audience that was finally listening, really listening. Yet, tension still lingered. Some guests still whispered. Some still glanced at her with quiet amusement, clearly expecting her to stumble again. She ignored them, letting the music guide her. Each note became a statement of resilience, a refusal to be diminished by fear or arrogance. She played faster, more passionately, letting the melodies rise and fall like waves, carrying both her emotions and the attention of the room. By the middle of her performance, the energy had shifted almost entirely. The room, once filled with casual chatter and quiet mockery, was now attentive and focused. The sounds of conversation were replaced by the resonance of the piano, a living, breathing expression of her dedication and talent. She felt herself becoming more than a waitress, more than a background figure. She became the voice of the music, the center of the room, and the keeper of her own story. The millionaire tried to regain his control, signaling subtly to some guests, encouraging them to laugh or comment, but it had no effect. His plan, whatever it had been, was unraveling. The attention he thought he commanded had shifted to her, and the beauty of the music left no room for cruelty. She had transformed his intended humiliation into an opportunity to shine. She played the final piece with everything she had. The notes soared and fell with a grace she had never felt before. She could feel the audience leaning in, the weight of their attention focused solely on the music. When the last note faded, there was a moment of silence so complete that it felt like the room itself was holding its breath. Then the applause came. Not polite, not hesitant, but genuine, warm, and loud. Guests clapped and cheered, some standing to show their admiration. A few people came forward, smiling, praising her skill, complimenting the emotion she had poured into the performance. She felt a surge of relief and joy, a release of all the tension she had carried for weeks. The millionaire stood frozen, his expression a mix of disbelief and frustration. His plan to control and humiliate her had failed spectacularly. Instead, she had claimed the room with nothing but her music, her talent, and her courage. She had turned a situation meant to intimidate her into one of triumph, and the difference was clear to everyone present. For a moment, she simply sat at the piano, catching her breath, letting the sound of applause wash over her. She felt proud, not just of the music, but of herself. Her perseverance, her focus, her ability to remain true to her art, even when fear threatened to overtake her. She had faced a challenge she had not anticipated and had risen above it with dignity and strength. Guests approached her after the performance, asking questions, expressing admiration, and some even offering connections or opportunities. She answered politely, feeling a mixture of humility and pride. Each compliment was a reminder that she had earned her place here, that talent and honesty could not be undermined by wealth or cruelty. The millionaire finally approached, his smile gone, replaced by something harder, almost grudging. "You surprised me," he said quietly. "I didn't expect that." She nodded politely, her hands still resting on the keys. "I played as I always do. Music is honest. It cannot lie." He said nothing more, simply stepping back, and she realized that the moment was over for him. Whatever control he had hoped to assert had vanished. She had proven, without words, that she could stand in the face of intention and judgment and shine on her own terms. As the evening continued, she was approached by more guests who wanted to hear her play again, who complimented her deeply, who were genuinely curious about her music and her journey. The warmth of their admiration contrasted sharply with the cold, calculated intentions of the millionaire. She felt a sense of relief and excitement she had never imagined. By the end of the night, she had played multiple pieces, each met with genuine applause. She had been tested, but she had emerged not only unscathed but elevated. Her confidence had grown, and she had seen the power of her own talent and courage in action. As she left the piano for the final time that night, she realized that this evening had been more than a performance. It had been a turning point, a moment where she had discovered the depth of her own strength and the ability of her art to overcome fear, judgment, and even cruelty. She walked away from the piano with her head held high, feeling proud, accomplished, and ready for whatever came next. The applause from her performance still echoed in the room as she stepped away from the piano. Her hands were trembling slightly, not from fear but from the intensity of the emotions she had poured into every note. She could feel her heart racing, a mix of excitement, relief, and disbelief. For the first time in a long while, she realized she had truly captivated a room of people, and the thought gave her a sense of quiet power she had never felt before. The guests approached her in small groups, complimenting her skill, asking about her training, and expressing genuine interest in her music. She answered politely, though her mind was still half focused on the piano. The way it had responded to her touch, and the way the melodies had seemed to speak directly to everyone in the room. She could feel herself glowing from the experience, a warmth that went beyond pride. It was the affirmation of her talent, acknowledged and appreciated. But even as the positive energy surrounded her, she couldn't ignore the presence of the millionaire. He had been watching quietly, his smile now faint, almost forced. There was no doubt in her mind that he had expected a different outcome, that the plan he had carefully orchestrated had been upended. His posture was rigid, his eyes fixed on her as if trying to figure out how she had managed to turn the situation around so completely. He stepped closer, a deliberate movement that drew her attention. "You've exceeded expectations," he said, though his tone lacked the warmth of genuine praise. "I didn't think you could handle such an audience." She met his gaze steadily, refusing to let any intimidation creep in. "Music speaks for itself," she replied calmly. "It doesn't matter who the audience is. If the music is honest, it will always be heard." His eyes flickered briefly, a mixture of frustration and admiration, before he turned away. She realized then that this evening had shifted something fundamental. He had intended to use his wealth and influence to control the moment, to assert dominance over her, but she had claimed it instead. The power he thought he held had evaporated in the presence of genuine talent and courage. The guests continued to gather around her, some asking for her to play another piece. She felt a renewed sense of confidence. The earlier tremor of nerves had disappeared, replaced by a clarity and focus she had never experienced before. She returned to the piano, sitting down with a sense of purpose that made the instrument feel like an extension of herself. This time, she began with a piece she had composed herself, a melody that carried her experiences, her struggles, and her hopes. The notes flowed with precision and emotion, filling the room with a sound that was both powerful and delicate. The guests listened intently, some closing their eyes to savor the music, others leaning closer to catch every nuance. She could see genuine appreciation in their expressions, and it filled her with a sense of accomplishment that went far beyond applause. As she played, she noticed the millionaire's expression change subtly. He had underestimated her resilience, the depth of her talent, and the way she could command attention with her music. His plan to humiliate her had not only failed but had backfired in a way that highlighted her skill and poise. The realization seemed to unsettle him, though he did not leave. He remained, a silent observer, perhaps trying to understand how she had turned the situation completely in her favor. Her performance continued, and with each passing moment, the room grew more captivated. The initial whispers and smirks from some guests faded into silence, replaced by genuine admiration. She could feel the energy shift, the room aligning with the honesty of her music. Even those who had intended to laugh or mock her were drawn into the beauty of the performance, unable to resist the emotion conveyed through each note. The confidence she felt was intoxicating, but it was grounded in something real. Her preparation, her talent, and her connection to the music. She played not to prove anything to the millionaire or the guests but to express herself fully, to let the melodies carry her story. In that moment, she realized the true power of art. It could overcome cruelty, it could transform doubt into admiration, and it could assert dignity without confrontation. The millionaire attempted to redirect the attention once, whispering to a few guests, but the effect was negligible. Her performance had taken on a life of its own. The audience was drawn entirely to her, and no amount of influence or manipulation could change that. She felt a quiet triumph, knowing that her perseverance and authenticity had created this shift, that her courage had allowed the music to shine without obstruction. As she transitioned to a faster, more complex piece, her fingers moved with confidence and fluidity. The room responded with energy, the earlier tension replaced by a sense of wonder. Guests who had been skeptical moments ago now watched in awe, some nodding subtly to the rhythm, others leaning in to catch the intricate details of her performance. The contrast between their initial doubt and their current admiration only strengthened her resolve. She noticed a few familiar faces in the crowd, individuals who had expressed curiosity or encouragement before the performance. Their smiles and nods reinforced the sense that she was succeeding on her own terms. It wasn't about the millionaire's wealth or control. It was about the connection between her music and the people who were willing to listen. That realization brought a deep sense of satisfaction, a confirmation that her dedication had been worth every moment of practice and every small sacrifice she had made to pursue her passion. When she finally concluded the piece, the room erupted into applause once again. This time, it was louder, more enthusiastic, and accompanied by genuine cheers and calls for encores. She rose from the piano, breathing heavily but feeling invigorated, and looked around at the guests. Their expressions were filled with admiration and respect, a validation of her skill and her courage. The millionaire remained in the background, his face a mask of control, but she could see the tension beneath it. He had underestimated her, underestimated the power of sincerity and talent, and now he was witnessing the consequences. She didn't gloat or mock him. She simply continued to engage with the audience, answering questions politely and allowing her presence to speak for itself. A few guests approached her privately, offering praise and even suggesting opportunities for performances outside the party. They seemed genuinely interested in her music, not in the drama that had surrounded the evening. She felt a mix of gratitude and excitement, realizing that this night could mark the beginning of something larger than she had imagined. Despite the overwhelming success of her performance, she remained grounded. She knew that one evening did not define her, that her true strength lay in the continued practice, dedication, and love for her craft. But she allowed herself to savor the moment, to acknowledge that she had faced a significant challenge and emerged with dignity and respect. As the night progressed, the atmosphere of the party shifted completely. What had begun as an event tinged with subtle cruelty and the anticipation of humiliation had transformed into a celebration of her talent. Guests who had been uncertain or skeptical were now fully engaged, their attention and admiration focused entirely on her. The energy in the room was electric, a tangible acknowledgement of her resilience and skill. The millionaire, for all his wealth and influence, had lost control of the narrative. She had reclaimed it not through confrontation but through the undeniable power of her music. It was a lesson in integrity and strength, a demonstration that true talent and authenticity could withstand manipulation and intimidation. She had turned the very situation designed to undermine her into a platform for triumph. As the party drew to a close, she was approached by several guests who expressed interest in her future performances. Invitations to play at other events were extended, along with offers to connect her with individuals who could support her career. She accepted graciously, recognizing that these opportunities were a direct result of her courage, talent, and the integrity she had maintained throughout the evening. The millionaire approached her one last time before leaving. His expression was unreadable, a mix of acknowledgement and frustration. "You did well," he said quietly, a faint note of respect in his voice. "Better than I expected." She nodded politely, her confidence unwavering. "Thank you. I simply played the music as I felt it. That is all it ever needed." He said nothing more, stepping back into the crowd, and she realized that this night had changed something fundamental. She had faced an attempt at humiliation, turned it into an opportunity for recognition, and emerged stronger and more confident. The experience had tested her in ways she had not anticipated, and she had met those tests with courage, focus, and authenticity. As she walked away from the piano for the final time that night, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The evening had been challenging, yes, but it had also been transformative. She had discovered the depth of her own strength, the power of her art to command respect, and the undeniable value of remaining true to oneself in the face of adversity. She left the venue with her head held high, the applause still echoing in her mind. The city lights outside seemed brighter, the night air filled with possibility, and she felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was not the end of her journey, but a pivotal moment, a turning point that would shape the path ahead. She had faced fear, manipulation, and doubt, and she had triumphed. In the quiet moments after the party, walking home through the streets that now seemed familiar yet somehow different, she reflected on the night. Music had carried her through, connecting her to the audience and allowing her to reclaim the power that had been threatened. She understood, more clearly than ever, that her talent, her dedication, and her courage were forces that no one could diminish. The experience left her with more than recognition. It left her with confidence, validation, and the knowledge that she could face challenges with grace. She had been tested in front of an audience, had faced someone who sought to control her, and had emerged victorious, not through confrontation but through the honesty and power of her own abilities. And in that moment, walking home with the city lights guiding her way, she knew that she was ready for whatever came next. The world had seen her talent, her courage, and her heart. She had proven to herself, above all, that no challenge could dim the light of someone determined to follow their passion with honesty and strength. The morning after the party, she woke up with a sense of calm she had never felt before. Her apartment, which usually felt small and confining, seemed warm and full of possibility. The night's events replayed in her mind. The grand room, the bright lights, the captivated audience, the way the music had carried her beyond fear and doubt. She smiled quietly to herself, realizing that the applause and recognition had left a mark far deeper than she had expected. Even as she prepared for her day, she felt lighter, more confident. The coffee she brewed seemed to taste better than usual, the sunlight streaming through her window warmer and more inviting. She thought about her piano, sitting quietly in the corner of the apartment, waiting for her fingers to return. The instrument had always been her companion, but now it felt like a partner in triumph, a witness to the courage she had shown the night before. Word of her performance spread quickly, first through the guests she had met, then through whispers in the social circles connected to the party. People spoke about the young waitress who had captivated a room full of wealthy and influential individuals, turning an evening meant for entertainment into a showcase of talent and resilience. She did not seek attention, but it found her nonetheless, knocking gently at the door of her everyday life. By the afternoon, her phone began to buzz with messages. Invitations to play at smaller events, local gatherings, and even private occasions arrived from people genuinely impressed by her performance. Each message made her heart flutter. She had always dreamed of sharing her music more widely, but she had never imagined opportunities appearing so quickly, so unexpectedly. The recognition was exciting, yet grounding. It reminded her that her hard work and dedication had real value. Her co-workers at the restaurant noticed a change as well. She walked with a steadiness in her step, a quiet confidence that had not been there before. When she shared parts of the night with them, their eyes widened in surprise and admiration. They laughed with her, congratulated her, and for a moment, the restaurant felt less like a workplace and more like a community celebrating one of its own. Even the regular customers seemed to sense something different about her. Some smiled knowingly as she approached their tables, a subtle acknowledgement of the accomplishment she carried quietly. She was still the same person, humble, hardworking, kind, but now she carried an invisible strength, a quiet assurance that no one could easily unsettle. The millionaire had not contacted her after the party. Initially, she had worried about what he might do, what he might say or attempt. But as days passed without word from him, she realized that the evening had shifted the balance. His attempt to control and humiliate her had failed so completely that he had no choice but to retreat. She did not feel triumphant in the sense of wanting revenge. She felt content. The validation she had gained from her talent and the respect she had earned were far more meaningful than proving a point to someone else. She returned to the piano each day, practicing with renewed passion. The experience of performing for a real audience had changed something in her fingers, her mind, and her heart. The music flowed more naturally, her confidence lending depth and emotion to every note. It was not just about perfect technique anymore. It was about expression, connection, and truth. Every piece she played carried a piece of the courage she had discovered in herself. As invitations continued to arrive, she began to see the potential for her life to change in a lasting way. She considered each opportunity carefully, knowing that she wanted to grow as a musician while remaining true to herself. Some offers were for private events with wealthy patrons, others for local gatherings and small concerts where the audience might be more intimate and appreciative. She welcomed all of them, understanding that each performance was a chance to share her music honestly and to continue building her path forward. Her neighbors and friends celebrated quietly with her. They had watched her practice, had heard her play in small, intimate settings, and had always believed in her talent. Now, seeing her success, they expressed joy and pride that seemed almost contagious. They reminded her of the value of genuine support, of people who care not for wealth or status but for the person and the art she created. The contrast between her life before the party and the possibilities after it was striking. For years, she had worked quietly, dreaming in private, practicing in solitude, never expecting recognition beyond the small circles she frequented. Now, doors were opening, not because of chance, but because of her dedication, her courage, and her willingness to face a challenge head-on. It was a lesson she carried with her, that talent and perseverance could not be diminished, even in the face of deliberate attempts to control or belittle. She began to plan for her first public performance following the party. The invitations she had received were exciting, but she chose carefully, picking a venue that felt right, a space where she could be herself and share her music without distraction or expectation. She prepared meticulously, not for validation, but to honor her craft and the journey that had brought her to this point. Each practice session was more than preparation. It was an affirmation. She experimented with new pieces, refined her techniques, and allowed herself moments of improvisation, letting the music lead her rather than forcing it into rigid patterns. She discovered new aspects of her talent, new depths of feeling she could express, and she realized that the journey had only just begun. The excitement she felt was tempered by humility. She knew that success could be fleeting, that recognition was meaningful but not the ultimate measure of her worth or talent. What mattered most was her dedication, her love for music, and her ability to remain true to herself. This understanding grounded her, allowing her to navigate the newfound attention with grace. The experience also changed the way she saw challenges and setbacks. The millionaire's attempt to humiliate her had been unexpected, unfair, and intimidating, but it had become a turning point. She realized that obstacles were not merely difficulties to endure but opportunities to discover inner strength and resilience. Her courage in facing that moment had unlocked a sense of empowerment that could never be taken away. As the weeks passed, she performed at several smaller events, each one an opportunity to refine her skills, connect with audiences, and gain confidence in her own voice. She noticed that people were drawn not only to her technical skill but to the emotion and authenticity she poured into her performances. She had learned that true artistry is not measured solely by perfection, but by the ability to communicate, to connect, and to leave an impression that lingers long after the final note fades. She also began to consider her long-term goals. For years, she had dreamed of a life where music was central, where she could inspire and move others through her art. Now, with recognition and opportunities, she felt a renewed determination to pursue that dream. She considered music schools, mentorships, and ways to reach broader audiences. The possibilities felt endless, yet achievable because she had discovered the courage and skill to seize them. Even in ordinary moments, she felt the impact of the party. Walking down the street, she held herself differently, aware of her own abilities and the value of her voice. When she sat at her piano at home, she played with a confidence she had never had before. Each note carried her experience, her triumph, and the knowledge that she had turned a moment of potential humiliation into a stepping stone for her future. The experience also reshaped her understanding of respect and recognition. She realized that wealth and status do not define the value of a person or their talent. True acknowledgement comes from genuine appreciation, honesty, and integrity. Those who had tried to belittle her had inadvertently highlighted the strength and authenticity she carried within. As opportunities continued to grow, she remained mindful of her journey. She remembered the hours spent practicing alone, the quiet victories in her small apartment, the supportive words of friends and neighbors, and the moments of doubt she had overcome. Each of these elements had built the foundation for her success, and she honored them with every performance, every note, and every decision she made. Over time, she developed a rhythm that balanced work, practice, and new opportunities. She continued to work at the restaurant, not because she had to, but because it grounded her, reminding her of her roots and the simple joys of life. She found ways to incorporate music into her daily routine, allowing creativity to flourish even in ordinary moments. She also became a source of inspiration for others. Friends, co-workers, and even strangers who had heard of her story reached out with admiration, encouragement, and curiosity. She shared her experiences honestly, speaking about the importance of perseverance, courage, and remaining true to oneself in the face of adversity. Her story became more than a tale of success. It became a lesson in resilience, integrity, and the transformative power of passion. Months later, as she performed for a growing audience, she reflected on how far she had come. The young waitress who had once worried about being judged and humiliated had become a musician recognized and respected by those who truly valued her talent. She had learned that courage and dedication are powerful allies, that opportunities often arise in unexpected ways, and that the strength to overcome challenges resides within herself. Even the memory of the millionaire faded into a distant lesson. He had tried to manipulate the situation, to assert control, and in doing so, had revealed her own potential in ways she might not have realized otherwise. The experience had been a test, and she had passed with grace, strength, and authenticity. She had claimed her place, not through confrontation or anger, but through the honesty of her talent and the courage of her spirit. Her life continued to grow richer in both experiences and possibilities. Invitations, performances, and recognition were no longer distant dreams, but tangible realities. She embraced them with humility, joy, and gratitude, knowing that her journey was ongoing, and that each new challenge was an opportunity to refine her craft and expand her horizons. And through it all, the music remained central. It was her voice, her expression, and her connection to the world. It had carried her through fear, through uncertainty, and through moments of doubt, proving that dedication, talent, and authenticity could overcome even the most carefully laid plans of others. She played not for approval or status, but because it was an essential part of who she was. a source of joy, strength, and purpose that could never be taken away. Walking home one evening after a successful performance, she paused on her balcony, looking out at the city lights that stretched endlessly. The streets below, once familiar and mundane, now seemed alive with possibility. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, not just from recognition, but from the knowledge that she had faced challenges, remained true to herself, and embraced her dreams fully. She smiled quietly, thinking of the journey that had brought her here. The long hours, the practice, the moments of doubt, the support of friends, and the courage to play even when fear threatened to take over. She understood that life was full of unexpected turns, and that the strength to navigate them lay in belief in oneself and one's passion. In that quiet moment, she knew that her story was only beginning. Opportunities, challenges, and triumphs would continue to come, but she had the courage, the talent, and the resilience to face them all. She had learned that true success is not about wealth, status, or the opinions of others. It is about honesty, dedication, and the ability to rise above adversity with grace and confidence. And as she returned inside, her fingers brushing the keys of her piano, she felt the quiet certainty that she had found her path. A path guided by music, courage, and an unshakable belief in herself.